TED Talks are recorded live at the TED Conference and produced with WNYC New York Public Radio. This episode features Carl Honore, author of In Praise of Slowness. TED Talks are made possible through the support of BMW, where ideas are everything. Here's Carl Honore.
What I'd like to start off with is an observation, which is that if I've learned anything over the last year, it's that the supreme irony of publishing a book about slowness is that you have to go around promoting it really fast. I seem to spend most of my time these days, zipping from city to city, studio to studio, interview to interview, serving up the book in really tiny bite-sized chunks, because everyone these days wants to know how to slow down, but they want to know how to slow down really quickly. And I think that's not really surprising, though, is it? Because that's kind of the world that we live in now, a world stuck in fast forward, a world obsessed with speed, with doing everything faster, with cramming more and more into less and less time. If you think about how we try to make things better, what do? Well, we speed them up, don't we? So, we used to dial, now we speed dial. We used to read, now we speed read. We used to walk, now we speed walk. And of course, we used to date, and now we speed date. And I think that in the headlong dash of daily life, we often lose sight of the damage that this roadrunner form of living does to us. We're so marinated in the culture of speed that we almost fail to notice the toll it takes on every aspect of our lives, on our health, our diet, our work, our relationships, the environment, and our community. And sometimes it takes a wake-up call, doesn't it, to alert us to the fact that we're hurrying through our lives instead of actually living them, that we're living the fast life instead of the good life. And I think for many people that wake-up call takes the form of an illness. Or maybe a relationship goes up in smoke because we haven't had the time or the patience or the tranquility to be with the other person, to listen to them. Now, my wake-up call came when I started reading bedtime stories to my son. And I found that at the end of the day, I would go into his room and I just couldn't slow down. I'd be speed reading The Cat in the Hat. I'd be skipping lines here, paragraphs there, sometimes a whole page. And of course, my little boy knew the book inside out. So we would quarrel. And what should have been the most relaxing, the most intimate, the most tender moment of the day when a dad sits down to read to his son became instead this kind of gladiatorial battle of wills, a clash between his speed and my speed and his slowness. And this went on for some time until I caught myself scanning a newspaper article with time-saving tips for fast people, and one of them made reference to a series of books called The 1-Minute Bedtime Story. My first reflex was to say, hallelujah, yeah, what a great idea. This is exactly what I'm looking for to speed up bedtime even more. But thankfully, a light bulb went on over my head, and my next reaction was very different. And I put away the newspaper, and I was getting on a plane, and I sat there, and I did something I hadn't done for a long time, which is I did nothing. I just thought. I thought long and hard. And by the time I got off that plane, I decided I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to investigate this whole roadrunner culture and what it was doing to me and to everyone else. And I had two questions in my head. The first was, how did we get so fast? And the second is it possible or even desirable to slow down? Now, if you think about how our world got so accelerated, the usual suspects rear their heads. You think of urbanization, consumerism, the workplace, technology. But I think if you cut through those forces, you get to what might be the deeper driver, the nub of the question, which is how we think about time itself. Now, in other cultures, time is cyclical. It's seen as moving in great, unhurried circles. It's always renewing and refreshing itself. Whereas in the West, time is linear. It's a finite resource. It's always draining away. You either use it or lose it. Time is money, as Benjamin Franklin said. And I guess that the question is it possible to break free from that mindset? And thankfully the answer is yes, because what I discovered when I began looking around, that there is a global backlash against this culture that tells us that faster is always better and that busier is best. Right across the world, people are doing the unthinkable. They're slowing down and finding that although conventional wisdom tells you that if you slow down, you're roadkill, the opposite turns out to be true, that by slowing down at the right moments, people find that they do everything better. They eat better, they make love better, they exercise better, they work better, they live better. And in this kind of cauldron of moments and places and acts of deceleration lie what a lot of people now refer to as the international slow movement. Now, if you'll permit me a small act of hypocrisy, I'll just give you a very quick overview of what's going on inside the slow movement. If you think of food, many of you will have heard of the slow food movement. It started in Italy, but has spread across the world and now has 100,000 members in 50 countries. And it's driven by a very simple and sensible message, which is that we get more pleasure and more health from our food when we cultivate, cook, and consume it at a reasonable pace. And out of the slow food movement has grown something called the slow cities movement. And in this, towns begin to rethink how they organize the urban landscape so that people are encouraged to slow down and smell the roses and connect with one another. So they might curb traffic or put in a park bench or some green space. And in some ways, these changes add up to more than the sum of their parts, because I think when a slow city becomes officially a slow city, it's kind of like a philosophical declaration. It's saying to the rest of the world and to the people in that town that we believe that in the 21st century, slowness has a role to play. Sex. How to bring your partner to orgasm in 30 seconds. Even sex is on a stopwatch these days. Now, we all laughed at Sting a few years ago when he went tantric, but you fast forward a few years and now you find couples of all ages flocking to workshops or maybe just on their own in their own bedrooms finding ways to put on the brakes and have better sex. The workplace. Right across much of the world, North America being a notable exception, working hours have been coming down. And Europe is an example of that. And people finding that their quality of life improves as they're working less, and also that their hourly productivity goes up. Now, clearly there are problems with the 35-hour work week in France, too much, too soon, too rigid. But other countries in Europe, notably the Nordic countries, are showing that it's possible to have a kick-ass economy without being a workaholic. And Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland now rank among the top 6 most competitive nations on Earth, and they work the kind of hours that would make the average American weep with envy. It's not just, though, these days, adults who are overworked, though, is it? It's children, too. I'm 37, and my childhood ended in the mid-'80s, and I look at kids now, and I'm just amazed by the way they race around with more homework, more tutoring, more extracurriculars than we would ever have conceived of a generation ago. But thankfully, there is a backlash there in parenting as well, and you're finding that there are homework bans springing up all over the developed world in schools which had been piling on the homework for years, and now they're discovering that less can be more. So there was a case up in Scotland recently where a fee-paying, high-achieving private school banned homework for everyone under the age of 13, and just this last month, the exam results came in, and in math, science, marks went up 20% on average last year. And I think what's very revealing is that the elite universities, who are often cited as the reason that people drive their kids and hothouse them so much, are starting to notice the caliber of students coming to them is falling. These kids have wonderful marks. They have CVs jammed with extracurriculars to the point that would make your eyes water, but they lack spark. They lack the ability to think creatively and outside the blade. They don't know how to dream. So wherever you look, the message, it seems to me, is the same, that less is very often more, that slower is very often better. But that said, of course, it's not that easy to slow down, is it? You heard that I got a speeding ticket while I was researching my book on the benefits of slowness, and that's true, but that's not all of it. I was actually en route to a dinner held by Slow Food at the time. And if that's not shaming enough, I got that ticket in Italy, and if any of you have ever driven on an Italian highway, you have a pretty good idea of how fast I was going. I think, why is it so hard to slow down? I think there are various reasons. One is that speed is fun. Speed is sexy, all that adrenaline rush. It's hard to give it up. I think there's a kind of metaphysical dimension, that speed becomes a way of walling ourselves off from the bigger, deeper questions. We fill our heads with distraction, with busyness, so that we don't have to ask, am I well? Am I happy? Are my children growing up right? Another reason, though, I think perhaps even the most powerful reason why we find it hard to slow down, is the cultural taboo that we've erected against slowing down. The slow is a dirty word in our culture. It's a byword for lazy, slacker. The slow movement, the purpose of the slow movement, or what its main goal really is, to tackle that taboo and to say that yes, sometimes slow is not the answer, that there is such a thing as bad slow. But the new idea, the sort of revolutionary idea of the slow movement, is that there is such a thing as good slow, too. And good slow is, taking the time to eat a meal with your family with the TV switched off, or taking the time to look at a problem from all angles in the office to make the best decision at work. or even simply just taking the time to slow down and savor your life. So, all of that said, is it, I guess, is it possible? That's really the main question before us today. Is it possible to slow down? And I'm happy to be able to say to you that the answer is a resounding yes. And I present myself as Exhibit A, a kind of reformed and rehabilitated speedaholic. I still love speed. You know, I live in London and I work as a journalist, and I enjoy the buzz and the busyness and the adrenaline rush that comes from both of those things. I play squash and ice hockey, two very fast sports, and I wouldn't give them up for the world. But I've also, over the last year or so, got in touch with my inner tortoise. My default mode is no longer to be a rushaholic. And the upshot of all of that is that I actually feel a lot happier, healthier, more productive than I ever have. I feel like I'm living my life rather than actually just racing through it. And perhaps the most important measure of the success of this is that I feel that my relationships are a lot deeper, richer, stronger. And for me, I guess the litmus test for whether this would work and what it would mean was always going to be bedtime stories, because that's sort of where the journey began. And because children have their own tempo and internal clock, they don't do quality time where you schedule 10 minutes for them to open up to you. They need you to move at their rhythm. I find that 10 minutes into a story, my son will suddenly say, something happened in the playground today that really bothered me, and we'll go off and have a conversation on that. A few months ago, I was getting ready to go on another book tour, and I had my bags packed. I was downstairs by the front door, and I was waiting for a taxi. My son came down the stairs, and he'd made a card for me, and he said to me, or he handed it to me, and I read it, and it said, "To Daddy, love Benjamin." And I thought, oh, that's really sweet. Is that a good luck on the book tour card? And he said, no, Daddy, this is a card for being the best story reader in the world. And I thought, yeah, this slowing down thing really does work. Thank you very much.
That was Carl Honore, recorded at TED Global in Oxford, England, July 2005. TED Talks are produced by WNYC New York Public Radio for TED. TED Talks are made possible through the support of BMW, where ideas are everything. For more information on TED, visit TED.com.